One of the biggest rookie mistakes I see is showing up unprepared and blowing your one shot. To help you avoid that, I created an on-demand masterclass that walks you through the 2 frameworks that you need to launch a thriving career as an independent adjuster. And you can register right now at adjustertv.com/deployment. You know, surviving your first storm is one thing, but actually making this career worth it financially is another thing entirely. But most adjusters get stuck in survival mode, pacing themselves just barely enough to avoid falling behind, yet grinding through 2 claims a day and wondering why the money still doesn't add up. The harder they push, the longer the nights get in those hotel rooms and the further they fall from the income that they were promised. I'm Matt, and I've helped thousands of adjusters move beyond survival into true scalability by building intentional workflows that unlock higher daily volume without burnout. And in this video, former student Eric shares how he escaped the 2 claims a day grind, what systems kept him from falling behind again, and why efficiency is the real dividing line between scraping by and thriving in this business. Starting now.
This ended up actually working out for me, but as I was going through the beginning of it, like every house was the same. So if you're going into a room, every room basically had the same damage done to it. You just had to identify, was I in a kitchen? Because when smoke goes into a house, the kitchen has things you have to clean. They're cleaning everything, right? If it right. exists, you're cleaning it. So what I did was I actually made an Excel spreadsheet that I can just walk in. This room has 3-inch base molding. This room has, cathedral ceilings. And it was just like a little checkoff sheet. So I could just go through each room and make that happen much faster. And then I would take those sheets home at the end of the night, and then it was just a matter of, these were also Liberty Mutual's stability / mobile, I don't know. They've changed the name like 3 times recently.
Totality, I think is what they call it now.
So I was going home, and then I was dumping it into that. So I was starting to use some tools because there's repetition in everything that we do, right? And then so the repetition is where you should be saving your time. You go into a room, you're like, this is a bedroom. It's got these 4 things. Move on to my next room. Then you go back, and then you pull up that. They call them, batches in
assemblies.
No, assemblies are different. Assemblies are pre-made that come with the program. There's something I think they're called batches that I can make, and then use those. Assemblies are made by, I don't know who makes them, to be honest. They're just in there for me, and I'm told I have to use, like Liberty Mutual requires you to use the roof assembly if you're replacing a roof, right? Like sure. You have to use that. So, but I didn't make that. That was already put in there. But there's another one that you can use that are called, I think they're called batches, and then you can make your own in there, and that was also speeding the process up. So that's what I was doing. And then, I was going home and writing. And then the other part too is that you can go to one house, and one house can take you an hour, and another house can take you 2.5. So that's the hard part for me is that there's, especially when I get into the water claims in New York State, like I could be going out and, a water claim could be in the basement with an unfinished basement, or a water claim could be a broken pipe on a, and you don't always get, which is why that first conversation is important. But even then I can go out to a place and it can be very different than what I was expecting and not give myself enough time, or they do the thing of like, oh, and this, right? Like that was never brought up in any conversation. And you're like, all right, those right days were really saving me, and I would put them in. I was trying to do 4 a day, and then whatever I couldn't get to the right day was left over for just a 3 today. And that was a lot for these smoke claims too.
There's only one company that provides E&O and general liability solely to the insurance industry, and that's Kaplik. They even have drone and cyber coverages. Download the free guide all about the different kinds of insurance that you as the adjuster should carry at cplic.net/adjustertv. The #1 resource for damage identification books, trainings, and certifications is Hague Education. Not only that, but they provide building inspection and desk adjuster trainings and certifications. Get a discount on all books, tools, certifications, and other trainings with code AdjusterTV at checkout at hagueeducation.com. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your experience working in New York. You said, obviously the New York license is pretty valuable. It sounds like Allcat jumped on you and wanted to start keeping you busy right away. How do you feel? Like I always tell people that they really need to get the California license and their New York license, because those are heavily populated states, and even though they might not get catastrophe work all the time, there's plenty of daily work. So what's kind of been your experience working in New York?
Yeah. So I remember you actually made a video on his New York, the Golden State, right?
Uh-huh.
And the answer is yes and no, right? So the answer is yes because New York State license is from what it appears. I've never taken any other test, but everybody's very much like it's probably one of the hardest tests to take and one of the hardest license to get. Um, so everybody's like, "Oh my God, you have a New York State license. That's pretty key." And for sure, I've gotten so many phone calls, been like, "Oh, you have a New York State license? Can we put you on our roster because we don't really have anybody in your area, right?" But the
Hmm.
problem with New York State is that when you look at the grand scheme of storms in the United States, New York State does not get that much.
Right.
So, I mean, right now, dailies are like once a week. When I first started and Allcat called me, this was in October, right? And they're like, "Hey, do you want to do claims for us?" Right? And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, send me." I was getting two a week. I'm like, I can't make any money off of this, right? So the New York State license is the thing that got my foot in the door, but it's not the thing I've been able to make my money off of, right? Uh,
Sure.
which isn't true either. The other part that I've kind of had to deal with is so I'm in upstate New York, so there's a huge area up there, right? Like people don't understand that the upstate New York is where I live in Rochester, New York. It takes me 6 hours to get down to New York City.
Yeah. It's a big state.
And the other thing too that you said all the time, which I knew at the beginning, you say yes to everything. If somebody calls you up and says, "Can you work?" You say yes, right? That's the other thing that got me really noticed. That and my communication is the other thing where I'm calling up and I'm being polite and I'm talking to people. I need some help. Hey, I'm having a hard time with this insured. Can you help me? Calling up the insureds, making sure you're contacting them. I'm going to be late. Communication is probably the number one thing that got me noticed at the beginning, that I was willing to pick up the telephone. As a matter of fact, one of the people at Allcat, a couple of people at Allcat have actually told me that they use me in training sessions because I do not hesitate to pick up that phone and call somebody for help. So that's
Yeah.
very key. But going back to New York State, it's the thing that gets me noticed all the time. But the thing that keeps getting me work is not New York State. It's the ability to say yes to everything, the good communication, and the ability to travel, right? Because I don't say no to anything, I'm going from right now, my range that they've been giving me jobs for in upstate New York is from Rochester to Albany, which is a 3.5 hour drive time. And that's on a daily, sometimes even go up in the Adirondack. So I can have a 4 hour one-way trip just to do a claim in New York State, so that other piece that got me really noticed was that I'd say yes to anything. If they said, "Hey, Eric, can you travel 3 hours to go somewhere?" I'd say, "Hey, just kick me some mileage and I'll do it,"
Hmm.
and that. So it's a great license to have, but it's a hard state to work in because there's just not a lot of work here, especially in upstate New York. But even, I mean, I've gone down to Long Island. My mom lives down there, so there's just not a lot of insurance work in New York State. You have to. It's more in the wintertime than anything. Um, so it's what has been made me my money is being a cat adjuster, not having my New York State license. But my New York State license gets me noticed all the time, and people constantly calling me like, "Hey, can you do daily claims in upstate New York?" And I'm like, "Yeah," until somebody calls me on a cat, then I can't help you anymore.
Well, and I was going to say that may be part of it. So I think, daily versus catastrophe, it's almost like you kind of have to pick a lane.
You
And it
do.
sounds like all cat is like they're kind of like keeping you in like sort of like a holding pattern until a cat comes, and then they, send you to California or wherever. I think if you were like, what, I'm not gonna do cat anymore. I'm just gonna stay home, and New York and like Pennsylvania, surrounding states, whatever, that's gonna be my area. And then you had all cat feeding you work, and you had Alacrity feeding you work, and Sedgwick and Mid America Cat and whoever. You probably would start to build up, you know, a weekly 7 to 12 claims a week, which is, when I
Pretty
was
good.
doing, yeah, that's really good. When I was
Yeah.
doing, when I was a staff adjuster, which was basically doing, and when I was doing dailies as well, 12 was like the outer limit because, especially because since most of them were large loss fires and water, 3 hours on site and then a couple hours to write it up, so on and so forth. You can't do like for a day, like on wind hail claims. But yeah, so when you're doing claims for all cat, do you do like are you making a coverage decision and settling up with the homeowner and all that stuff, or are you just doing like photo and scope and write, or how what sort of a role do you have?
Except for maybe one or two cases, everything I've ever done has just been scope and write up. They've never made any decisions for anybody. Um, so that hasn't been. I think I almost came close to that when I went to California because when Allcat first called me for that, they said you're going to be doing state farm claims. But then that got changed to not. So, but no, everything I've done has been scope, take pictures, write, and get it in, and then the desk adjusters make all the calls. And yeah, you can't even like go to a homeowner and be like, I think you have to be like, look, I'm just here because I'm documenting everything and want to try and help you get started in the claims process and but no, I cannot at all be. I've never done a job except for maybe one where I've been part of the back end process that this is telling them what's going to happen. So
I did a little bit of photo and scope like a long time ago as part of like a pilot program, but I always did like the full thing. So it was I made a coverage decision. I settled up with the homeowner. Sometimes, a lot of times, I wrote checks and everything. But I'm curious if you're not making the coverage decision, if the insured is asking you questions, like what do you say? What do you say to them?
Well, as soon as I show up, the very first thing I say to them is, please understand my role here, which is to help you understand the process and get started in it. And my job is to take pictures. I cannot tell you or even give you some indication as to whether this is covered or not because I'm not the person that's going to make that decision. But I will do what I can understanding the insurance process to help you understand the process better. So, we talk about things like, well, what's the supplemental part of it? What's, how long will this take to get to? So that's, and it's really hard because I'm not supposed to say that's damage, but it is, you know what I mean? So you walk
Right.
this fine line between like, and the roofs, the insurance companies really kind of get a little bit more concerned about, and don't do as many of those. But if I walk into a situation where I'm like, there's no way this is going to be covered, I have a very different style, which is to basically say as little as possible, right? Um, but even when I'm, going into a situation where I almost think like it's a home run, I'm still like, look, I can't tell you if this is going to be covered or not. And I do apologize that I'm going to be talking in ways that sounds like that this may not be covered. And I apologize if that's unsettling, but I don't really have any choice. And so many people, when I really talk to them about transparency about what my role is here, they're pretty good about it. I probably have gotten into one or two arguments with anybody. So it's been really like just being upfront about it and being honest about it. Just being like, look, I'm just here to take pictures. I'll do the best I can. One of the things that the insureds have so much appreciated from me is being like, look, this is what's going to happen. This is your next step. Understand, that you're probably going to be getting your own contractor, understand that if for some reason you disagree with something, that it's okay. That's not a problem. You can go ahead. There's a supplemental process. You just need to reach back out to your desk adjuster. So what they've really valued from me, and I've really kind of put more emphasis on because of my role that I can't tell them is like, this is what, and so many of them are like, I'm glad somebody finally told me what's going on. You're the
Right.
first person in this process that's come out here and explained to me what's happening. So I just make it very clear as to what I'm doing.
Yep.
And then you get the insurers like, all right, but I'm not going to tell anybody. Just tell me what you think. I'm like, sir, I'm sorry, I can't do that, right? You just have to stick to your guns on that one.
I can see like the benefit of doing the photo and scope, and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's got to be, as a homeowner, it's got to be a little bit of a weird experience, especially if you don't get somebody who's willing to take a few extra minutes to explain the process,
Yeah,
right?
that's why I do that so much is to explain the process because it's such a weird situation. You're the
Yeah,
first person they've really interacted with, and now they want answers from you, and you can't give it to them. So
yeah, yeah.
be open about that. Look, I'm sorry. I understand. If I was a homeowner, this would be a hard situation for me too, because I'm standing here in front of you and I can talk to you, right? So, but unfortunately I can't do that. And they get it, right? Especially if that's what the expectation is. And you've talked about that a lot too, is showing up and setting expectation of what we're doing for this today.
And if you want to know what really determines whether you thrive or burn out once the claims start pouring in, watch this video right here. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great storm.